Leslie had always believed that the past was something you could outgrow if you just moved fast enough, smiled wide enough, and refused to look back for too long. But Fairmont Crest had a way of holding people in place, like a beautifully decorated cage where secrets echoed louder than truth, and lately, the walls had begun to close in on her in a way she could no longer ignore. It started subtly, with small inconsistencies in stories she had been told all her life. Her mother's carefully rehearsed answers, the sudden silences when certain names came up, the way older residents of Fairmont Crest would look at her with a flicker of recognition that didn't quite match what they said aloud. Leslie wasn't naive. She had grown up surrounded by wealth, power, and the kind of social maneuvering that required emotional intelligence just to survive. So, when the cracks began to show, she noticed. And once she noticed, she couldn't unsee them. The turning point came on a quiet afternoon when she stumbled across an old photograph tucked inside a book that didn't belong to her, a picture of her mother, younger and softer, standing beside a man whose face had been deliberately scratched out. That alone would have been suspicious, but what sent a chill through Leslie's entire body was the faint handwriting at the bottom. Forever isn't long enough.
D.
That single initial was enough to unravel everything she thought she knew. She confronted her mother that very night, expecting denial, maybe even anger, but what she got instead was fear, raw and unfiltered. It was the first time Leslie had ever seen her mother lose control, and in that moment, she realized that whatever the truth was, it was far bigger than a simple family secret. Her mother refused to explain, insisting only that some things were better left buried, that digging into the past would only bring pain. But Leslie had never been the kind of person who accepted vague warnings without question. If anything, that conversation only fueled her determination. Over the next few days, she began quietly investigating, piecing together fragments of information from old records, whispered conversations, and anyone willing to talk, though most weren't. The name Dante surfaced again and again, always accompanied by hesitation, as if speaking it aloud might summon something dangerous. Some described him as charismatic, others as reckless, but everyone agreed on one thing. Dante had disappeared years ago under circumstances no one fully understood. And somehow, Leslie was connected to him in a way no one wanted to admit. The realization hit her like a storm. Dante wasn't just a name from the past. He was her father. The truth was both electrifying and terrifying. Her entire life had been built on a lie, and now that lie was unraveling faster than she could contain it. She tried to confront her mother again, but this time, the woman shut down completely, retreating behind a wall of silence, so impenetrable it was almost cruel. That was when Leslie knew she couldn't stay in Fairmont Crest any longer. The place that had once felt like home now felt suffocating, every corner filled with unanswered questions and half-truths. If she wanted real answers, she would have to find them herself. The decision to leave wasn't easy. Fairmont Crest was all she had ever known, and walking away meant stepping into a world filled with uncertainty. But the need to understand her identity outweighed her fear. She packed her bags in the middle of the night, moving quietly through the house as if she were afraid the walls themselves might try to stop her. Before leaving, she paused in her room, taking one last look at the life she was about to leave behind. There was a moment of hesitation, a fleeting thought that maybe she should stay, that maybe her mother was right, and some truths were better left undiscovered. But then she remembered the photograph, the scratched-out face, the initial that had changed everything. And just like that, the doubt disappeared. She left without saying goodbye. The journey to find Dante was anything but straightforward. All she had were fragments, old addresses, vague rumors, and a name that carried more questions than answers. She traveled from one city to another, following leads that often led nowhere, each dead end testing her resolve. But Leslie was persistent. Every setback only made her more determined to keep going. Along the way, she began to uncover pieces of her father's story, stories that painted a complicated picture of a man who was both admired and feared. Dante had been involved in dealings that blurred the line between legitimate and dangerous, a man who thrived in the gray areas most people avoided. It became clear that his disappearance hadn't been an accident. It had been a necessity. The deeper Leslie dug, the more she realized that finding Dante wouldn't just be about reconnecting with her father. It would mean stepping into a world she barely understood, a world that could put her in real danger. But by then, there was no turning back. She had come too far to stop. The breakthrough came when she tracked down someone who had once worked closely with Dante, a man who initially refused to speak, but eventually relented after seeing the determination in her eyes. He didn't give her much, just a location and a warning. If you find him, be prepared for the truth. It's not what you think. Those words echoed in her mind as she made her way to the place where Dante was supposedly hiding. It was nothing like she expected. No grand estate or luxurious hideaway, just a quiet, unassuming location that blended into its surroundings. For a moment, she wondered if this was another dead end. But then she saw him. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking it, the presence, the intensity, the way he carried himself. Dante was real, and he was right in front of her. The moment was surreal, years of questions and emotions colliding all at once. She had imagined this meeting countless times, rehearsed what she would say, how she would react, but none of that preparation mattered when faced with reality. Dante turned to look at her, and for a brief second, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he had been expecting her all along. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence was heavy, filled with everything that had been left unsaid for years. When Leslie finally found her voice, it came out steadier than she expected. "Are you Dante?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. He studied her carefully before responding, his expression unreadable. "I was wondering when you'd find me," he said. That was all it took to confirm it. He knew who she was. The realization sent a wave of emotions crashing over her, anger, confusion, relief, all tangled together in a way that made it hard to think clearly. "You're my father," she said, the words feeling both foreign and familiar at the same time. Dante didn't deny it. Instead, he nodded slightly, as if acknowledging something inevitable. "Yes," he said simply. There was no dramatic reveal, no emotional outburst, just a quiet confirmation that changed everything. Leslie had spent so long searching for this moment, imagining what it would feel like, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to do with it. She had questions, so many questions, but where did she even begin? "Why did you leave?" she asked finally, her voice carrying a hint of the pain she had tried so hard to suppress. Dante exhaled slowly, as if the weight of that question was something he had been carrying for years. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," he said. "I left because I had no choice." That answer only raised more questions, but Leslie could sense that whatever the truth was, it wasn't simple. And as she stood there, face to face with the man who had been missing from her life for so long, she realized that this was only the beginning. Finding Dante wasn't the end of her journey. It was the start of something far more complicated, something that would force her to confront not just her past, but the kind of person she wanted to become. Back in Fairmont Crest, her absence wouldn't go unnoticed. Questions would be asked, alliances would shift, and the truth she had uncovered would send shockwaves through the community. Because in a place built on secrets, the truth had a way of changing everything. And Leslie had just uncovered one of the biggest secrets of all. Leslie stood there longer than she realized, the silence between her and Dante stretching into something almost tangible, like a thread pulled too tight that could snap at any second, yet neither of them seemed willing to be the first to break it. The man in front of her, this stranger who was somehow her father, didn't look like the kind of person who disappeared without reason, and yet everything about him suggested a life lived in shadows, a life carefully constructed to avoid being found. That contradiction unsettled her more than she expected. She had spent days, weeks even, imagining this moment, rehearsing accusations, preparing herself for rejection or denial, but Dante's calm acknowledgement had disarmed her completely. It wasn't supposed to be this simple, and yet, in its simplicity, it felt far more complicated than she could have prepared for. "You knew I'd come?" she finally asked, her voice steadier now, though her heart was still racing with the weight of everything she didn't yet understand. Dante gave a faint, almost tired smile, the kind that hinted at years of experience and regret layered beneath the surface. I didn't know when, he admitted, but I knew someday you would start asking the right questions. You always struck me as someone who wouldn't accept easy answers. That comment caught her off guard, not just because it felt oddly accurate, but because it implied a familiarity he shouldn't have had. You don't know me, she said quickly, almost defensively. His expression shifted slightly, something softer flickering in his eyes. No, he agreed, I don't. And that's on me. There it was, the first crack in his composure, the first sign that this wasn't as easy for him as he was trying to make it seem. Leslie felt a surge of conflicting emotions rise up again, sharper this time. You don't get to just say that like it fixes anything, she snapped, the frustration she had been holding back finally surfacing. You weren't there.
You didn't raise me.
You didn't answer any of my questions growing up. You just disappeared. Dante didn't interrupt her. He let her speak, let the anger come out in full force, and that somehow made it harder to stay angry. When she finished, he nodded slowly, as if acknowledging every word. You're right, he said quietly. I wasn't there. And I don't expect you to forgive that. The honesty in his response threw her off balance again. She had expected excuses, maybe even lies, anything that would give her a clear reason to keep her guard up. But this was something else entirely. Then why? She pressed, her voice softer now but no less urgent. What could possibly be worth walking away from your own child? Dante looked away for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the horizon as if the answer might be written somewhere in the distance. When he spoke again, his tone carried a weight that made Leslie instinctively brace herself. The kind of life I was living back then, it wasn't safe, he said. Not for me, and definitely not for you. There were people, powerful people, who wouldn't have hesitated to use you to get to me. Leaving was the only way to make sure that didn't happen. Leslie frowned, trying to process that. That sounds like something out of a movie, she said, though a part of her knew better than to dismiss it entirely. She had already uncovered enough to know Dante's past wasn't ordinary. I wish it were that simple, he replied. If it were, I wouldn't have stayed away this long. There was a sincerity in his voice that made it difficult to doubt him, but belief didn't come easily. Not after a lifetime of unanswered questions. So what now? She asked. You expect me to just accept that and move on? Pretend everything makes sense? No, Dante said immediately. I expect you to question everything. You should. But I also think you deserve the truth. All of it. Not the version your mother gave you, not the rumors you've heard, the real story. That was exactly what she wanted, and yet hearing it offered so directly made her hesitate. Because the truth, whatever it was, had already changed her life once. There was no guarantee it wouldn't do it again. Back in Fairmont Crest, the ripple effects of Leslie's disappearance were already beginning to take shape. Her sudden absence hadn't gone unnoticed for long, and it didn't take much for speculation to spread. In a place where gossip traveled faster than facts, theories began forming almost immediately. Some believed she had left to escape the pressure of expectations, others suspected something more dramatic, but very few were prepared for the truth. Her mother, however, knew exactly what it meant. The moment she realized Leslie was gone, a quiet panic set in, one she tried desperately to conceal but couldn't fully suppress. She had spent years keeping the past buried, carefully constructing a version of reality that protected both herself and her daughter. Now, that carefully built illusion was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She knows, she whispered to herself, the words heavy with inevitability. And if Leslie knew, it was only a matter of time before others did too. Meanwhile, miles away from Fairmont Crest, Leslie found herself sitting across from Dante in a small, dimly lit room, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. This was it, the moment where everything would either make sense or fall apart completely. Start from the beginning, she said, her gaze steady. No more half-truths. Dante studied her for a moment, as if weighing how much to say, before finally nodding. All right, he agreed. But you need to understand something first. Once you hear this, there's no going back. The life you knew, the people you trust, it's all connected in ways you can't even imagine yet. Leslie didn't flinch. Then I guess it's a good thing I'm ready. Whether she truly was or not remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. The truth was coming, and it was going to change everything.